Hello, everyone. My name is Philip Edu. I'm one of the methodology experts in NCADE, and today I'm going to present to you information about how to conduct qualitative research and also decisions, actions that you have to take, and also the implications. So let me start the process. Let me show you my screen. Okay, so I just want to start by helping you to understand the basic differences between qualitative and quantitative research. So the quantitative research focuses on trying to make observations. So you are making observations by measuring variables, and then after measuring, you want to test for a hypothesis, but you can also test for theory. So you are collecting observation to test hypothesis or theory. But for the qualitative data or qualitative research, what you are focusing on is you are collecting information or making observation to develop themes to address your research question, or to develop a theory for you to understand a problem that you have identified, or for you to understand a phenomenon. So you can see that for quantitative, you are collecting numbers. You are collecting numbers. For the qualitative, you are collecting narrative stories. You are collecting words from participants for you to develop themes that represent the information participants have you have collected from participants, and at the same time address the research question that you have. So today we're going to go through qualitative research. And as I said, if you have any questions, feel free to type them in, and sometime I'm going to also give you the chance to talk if you want to ask the questions. And also, I also want the presentation to be very interactive, so I'm going to also ask you some few questions, and feel free to respond to that by typing in your answers, and so that you learn more from this presentation. So the question is, when do you conduct qualitative research, or when do you do a qualitative study? And most of the time you do qualitative study if you want to explore a phenomenon, a case or a situation in the natural setting. So in its natural environment, you just want to find out what is really going on concerning the phenomenon. Or you have identified a complex issue that you want to really look in depth, find out what is really going on with that complex information. And sometimes you want to explain a process or a behavior, or a behavior like, okay, how do participants orchestrate to a certain culture, or a behavior like how do people deal with depression. So if you want to explain a behavior, you can be able to collect data from participants for you to understand a process or behavior of the specific participant that you are focusing on. If you want to describe an issue using non-numerical data, it's also part of qualitative study. Maybe you want to understand a phenomenon, maybe a complex issue, a behavior, or a situation that you want people to understand. You can do a qualitative study. Maybe you want to collect stories from participants, and after collecting the stories, you want to analyze the story and retell them in a chronological order or based on certain themes to address your research question. You can also use a qualitative study, or you can do a qualitative study. Okay, so what I'm going to do right now here is I'm going to give you a big picture of what the process is when you are conducting qualitative study. So always think about consistency, because what you are doing is that you are making sure that everything that you are going to do in a qualitative study, any action that you're going to take, there's consistency, right? So as always, you start with research by identifying a problem, right? You can identify a problem based on your personal experience, or based on what somebody has told you, or based on what you have read. And based on the problem, you go back into the literature and see what is really happening. right? So you identify a problem, you identify a gap in the literature related to the problem, and then you state the purpose of your study, what exactly you want to do. And sometimes you use like the purpose of this study is to understand phenomenon, the purpose of this study is to describe what is happening, the purpose of this study is to explore or conceptualize. And we will talk more about the purpose. Then the research question. So you have to make sure that the problem goes with the purpose goes with the problem, and also based on the purpose, you develop research question, and then the research question should be exploratory in nature, and I'm going to talk more about that. And then after that, you think about your research plan. That is your research design. It's a logical description of how data will be collected or analyzed to address your research question that you have. So under research design, we have the research approach, the data collection strategy that you want to use, and also the sampling strategies. Then because you are using a qualitative approach, there are some assumptions that you have to take into consideration. We will talk more about that related to ontology, epistemology, and axiology. Then you have to think about yourself too. Because you are an instrument in a qualitative study, the researcher is an instrument. You have to know your role in the study, know your background, know your beliefs, know your perception, know your bias, because they are going to influence the actions that you're going to take in a study. They're going to influence maybe the approach that you take. You're going to influence how you ask your participant questions. They're going to influence the relationship that you're going to have with your participant. So your role is very important. Then you have to think about the data analysis after collecting the data. So after collecting data, you have to think about the data analysis, and then you have to also think about a quality assurance, and I'm going to talk about issue related to credibility, making sure that your data is credible and your data can be transferred, the findings can be transferred from one situation to another situation, and dependability. I'm going to talk about that. And then lastly, I will not get the chance to talk about presentation and interpretation of your findings. I have another presentation that talks about qualitative analysis. So if you want that information, you can email me and I'll send that to you. So this is the big picture of your qualitative research. So always think about these areas when you are doing a qualitative. What is the problem that you want to address? What is the purpose of your study? What is your research question? What is your research design? What are some of the assumptions that you have to take into consideration? What are your beliefs? What are your perceptions? What are your biases? How are you going to analyze the data? How are you going to make sure that the information that you are presenting is credible? Because it's subjective information. So you have to try to convince your audience that this is the findings best reflect the information you collected from participants, and also the presentation of your findings. So let's start with the problem statement. So the problem statement is you are just describing specific problem that you want to address in your study. How are you going to find out the problem? Based on the existing studies, right? Based on a recommendation of previous researchers concerning the topic that you want to focus on. It can also be based on what has been done in the research, and based on what has been done, you can deduce or make some kind of analysis to find out what can be studied, right? And this also led me to talk about identifying a gap in the literature. How do you do that? There are many ways of identifying a gap in the literature. And some of the ways there are about 4 ways. The first one is confusion spotting. So this means that when you're reading a literature and then about your topic, and then there are competing explanations concerning your topic or concerning the issue that you want to focus on. One researcher is saying that this is the thing, and another researcher is also giving a contradictory findings. So you can spot that gap and then say that because we are given a contradictory findings, I'm going to do my research and find out what is really going on. So that's all about confusion spotting. Neglect spotting is where there's an area which has been overlooked, or researchers are not doing any kind of research in that area, or there's lack of empirical evidence or support, and then you want to do research and see what is going on, or you want to do research and try to understand the phenomenon where that nobody is focusing on, or less information has been collected from that area. And the next one is application spotting. This is where you are building on the existing study. So based on what has been done, what are you going to do, right? So you are building on the existing study, or you are doing a study to complement what has been done. Maybe there's a study that has focused on quantitative, trying to collect numbers. And then maybe there's information about one variable causing the other variables, right? There's a causal relationship between two variables. And all the researchers are saying there's causal relationship between two variables using a quantitative study. So you want to do a qualitative study and find out how variable A is influencing or impacting variable D or B. So you are looking at the process, the causal process, and that is where you can also do your researching. The last one is the methodological flaw. Let's say you are reading the research and realize that, oh, I think they use wrong approach, or they use wrong research approach, or the research approach that they used wasn't suitable. Then, you can do your research and see they use the right approach to look into the same issue or the situation or the case that the research did, or the research did an information or did a study on. And also maybe how they analyze the data was wrong. So you want to collect your data, you're going to want to look into the same issue and trying to find out the best way of analyzing the data that is credible and other things. So these are the four main areas of identifying a gap in the literature. I don't know whether I have a question. I can, before I move on, I can unmute everyone. And if you have a question, you can ask me. Do you have any questions?
I remind them often that I'm not a school employee.
Did you do this? Okay, so then let me mute everyone. So if you have a question, you can type it in so that you can, I'll be able to address them for you. So the next one is the purpose of your study. And look at the purpose of your study as, what exactly you want to find out in the study. What are you going to find out? So based on the problem that you have identified, what are you going to find out in the study? What are you going to do in the study? So there are some of the things that you have to take into consideration. The first one is when you are constructing the purpose of your study, always think about the operative word or the action word. So let's say you are doing research, and then you can start by saying, okay, maybe you want to explain. So the purpose of this study is to explain something that you want to focus on. Or the purpose of this study is to describe a certain behavior. And also the next one is to think about the phenomena that you want to focus on. What exactly do you want to really focus on, right? And then the third one is specific participants that you want to focus on, and also the location. Let me give you an example. I think I always like giving examples so that students will understand what I'm really giving. So look at this example. The purpose of the study is to explain how mental health stigma influences health-seeking behaviors among teens with mental health problems in a low-income neighborhood in Accra, Ghana. I use Accra, Ghana because I come from Ghana. Okay, so looking at this, you can see that there's operative word. It's explain. And what's the phenomenon? The phenomenon that you're looking at is a mental health stigma and also health-seeking behaviors. And who are you researching? Teens. Not all teens, those who have mental health problems. And where are they located? Low-income neighborhood in Accra. So see how I have all the location here. I have information about the phenomenon. I have what exactly I want to do in a study. So that is what you have to do whenever you are doing, you are considering the purpose of the study. It's very clear, and you will definitely know what exactly I want to find out. So I think there are questions coming in, and I'll give the chance to Dr. Glazik and for...
Yes, I was I saw that you were coming up to a pause.
Okay.
There's a question specifically, is it too ambitious to identify more than one gap? And then there's another one, but
oh yes, you can. Yes, you can identify more than one gap. But you know, it's always good to try to focus on a single gap, but especially when let me go back a little bit and show you. Let's say that your topic that you are focusing on is there's an area that has been neglected, right? The fact that the area has been neglected doesn't mean that you should do research there. Find out why researchers are not doing that research. Maybe it's because of ethical issues. So when you read a lot and you realize that, oh, this area has been neglected, so I'm going to do research, and without finding more information about that, you're going to, maybe you're going to have problems with IRB. So always think about, you can think about more than one spotting or one gap, but at the end of the day, everything should come together to help you to construct the specific problem that you want to do. So you can have a study where you can identify neglect and also the same time identify methodological flaw. Because of the neglect and also methodological flaw, you want to do this research, so you can do that. The most important thing is you have to make sure that you have the problem or the gap has been clearly identified and described. I hope I've answered your question. Another question?
Yes, the other question was whether there's going to be reference to those 4 points in the end of the presentation, and I think it might be this, which I just popped into the chat box, the point about identifying gaps.
Gap, oh yeah.
That's the reference that Helena was referring to.
Yes,
if not,
so
let us know, Helena.
Oh, okay. So, and also you can email us so that I can send you the PowerPoint. I have all the reference listed on the PowerPoint, last slide. So, and any other question for me? Okay, so let's move on. I think the time is running out, so I'm going to be a little bit fast here so that we'll be able to go through everything. So the next one is your research question. So your qualitative research question, what is the essence of having your research question? Is going to drive your study. That's the main reason why you are doing the research. You want to collect data to address your research question. So the research question drives your study. The research question informs your research approach that you have to use, and also informs the data collection and analysis process. And the characteristics of qualitative research question is exploratory in nature. So the research question should be open-ended and very specific in terms of the context. And then let me give you the type of research question under qualitative study. So the first one, there are two main types. We have an ontological research.
Dr. Before you do that,
yes.
There's a question before you move on. How many literature resources should we explore before determining that there is a gap?
Unlimited.
Right.
So it's because it's based on the topic that you are focusing on, right? So some of the topic maybe they haven't done much research, so you have to find out. And another way is to look at your topic and look at the currently what is going on concerning the topic. So you look at studies that have been done maybe 2 years ago until now and see what is the current trend of your topic, and that will help you to identify your topic. It's unlimited because what you're doing is that you continue to review literature, and then you identify a gap, and sometimes you have to continue to do that and see whether really the gap is the best gap for you to focus on. Maybe you have identified a gap right now, but when you read another literature, you realize that, oh, this gap has already been filled. So you don't want to repeat what somebody has done. You want to do new things so that you'll be able to contribute to the field that you are you are in. So it's always important for you to continuously read the existing literature and work on your literature review, and at the same time making an adjustment to your problem and also an adjustment. So then whenever you make an adjustment to your problem, it's going to affect your purpose of your study, it's going to affect your research question. And that's why you also have to think about the consistency. So when you change something about, maybe you change your research question, it's going to kind of affect your methodology. So always have to think about the big picture of your study so that when you make a change, it also, you can make an adjustment so that you will not contradict yourself. Any other question? Okay, so there are two types of qualitative research question, ontological research question. So the ontological research question focuses on capturing participants' reality, right? You are capturing the experience of participant. Maybe participant has passed through something, maybe depression, and then you as a researcher want the person to talk about the experience concerning depression. And also we have epistemological research question. It focuses on if you want to understand a phenomenon or if you want to understand a situation or a case, your research question will be focusing on epistemological research question. I have an example here. I want you to type in your answer. So based on this example, how does mental health stigma influence help-seeking behaviors among teens with mental health problems in a low-income neighborhood in Accra, Ghana? What type of research question is this? So if you can type in your answer, that would be great. Don't be afraid of getting it wrong. We are all learning. Is it an epistemological research question? Yes, it is. Yes. I think all of you are getting it right. So the reason why it's epistemological is that you want to really understand a phenomenon. You want to understand the causal, maybe the relationship, how the mental health stigma influences health-seeking behavior among the teen. So because you want to capture or understand the relationship between the stigma and also the health-seeking behavior, and then another thing that you can also look at is start with how. Then because of that is epistemological research question. And also your research question can be both. It can be ontological and also epistemological research question. Sometimes you want to give participants a chance for them to understand a phenomenon, give them a chance for them to tell you their reality, what they think about the experience. At the same time, you want to really understand the experience. You as a researcher want to make sense of the experience, so it can be both. Any questions?
There's a question. What about why questions? I guess in addition to what, how, etc.
Yeah, why is more of you want to find out explanation, so it's more of epistemological research question. So so look at it this way. If you as a researcher want the participant to tell you what they have experienced and you communicating that experience to us, then it's more of ontological, right? You are capturing something that they have experienced and then you are presenting it to us. You are not doing anything to it. You are analyzing and presenting to us. But when you want to go beyond just presenting and then understand maybe a causal relationship or understand what is going on, maybe factors that influence their behavior, then it's more of epistemological research question. And it can be both too. Okay, so let's talk about research design. And so, as I said, research design is a logical description of how data will be collected and analyzed. So it's a logical description. So what involves? So it involves stating your research approach and also the data collection strategy that you want to use and sampling strategy or sampling technique that you want to use. It also involves data analysis, how you're going to analyze your data. So all these actions, they are also influenced about, is influenced by your philosophical assumptions. So what is the philosophical assumption related to or that informs your approach? We're going to talk about that. And also, it's also your approach can, your personal background and biases can also influence the approach that you are using or influence the overall design. As you collect your data, as you analyze, your personal biases informs or influences the process.
So we have another question,
okay.
Dr. Adu.
Yes.
And I think it's related to those why questions, etc. The question is, what about impact questions? Like, what is the impact of, and then, fill in the blank.
Yes, so this is the thing. When you talk about what is the impact of this, it's more of epistemological, because you want to understand something, right? How something impacts something. But what you have to think about is when you use a word impact, you are moving a little bit away from qualitative to quantitative. What is the effect? What is the impact of this variable on the other variable? So you have to be very careful the way you construct your qualitative research question. Qualitative is more about exploratory. You are exploring something. It's not quite like close-ended. So, any other question? Okay, so then let's talk about epistemological or philosophical assumptions. So qualitative study has its own philosophical assumptions, and one of them is ontology. I think you have, if you have already taken qualitative research, you have gone through this, but let's make it more practical here. So ontological is more about reality. So for qualitative study, what you are doing is that you are capturing multiple realities, right? Each participant has passed through similar some experiences, and then you are giving them the chance for them to tell you their reality, right? What they're going to tell you, if 10 people pass through the same experience, the information they're going to give you might be different. It's not going to be the same, although they have passed through the experience. Why? Because they have different background, different biases or different beliefs. So it affects the way they bring that information. So we, in qualitative study, what you're doing is that you are capturing subjective reality. At the same time, you are capturing multiple realities. Subjective means that it's based on individual experience. It's subjective. Based on their experience, they just give you the reality. And then we also think about socially constructed reality. Reality that has been agreed in a society and as the truth, that's with a small t. So what is the implication of this? So as a researcher, you have to understand that you are, when you are focusing on a phenomenon, you are collecting multiple realities. So you are capturing participant reality, capturing participant subjective views and experiences, and based on these views and experiences, we'll be able to gather multiple perspectives concerning a topic that you focus on or the phenomenon that you're focusing on. So you are going in there to capture that multiple perspective, and then when you capture the multiple perspective, you bring them together and try to develop themes that cut across the realities that you have taken or cut across the information that they gave you. So the next one is epistemology. Epistemology. I find it very difficult to pronounce this. So it's all about knowledge, the study of knowledge. So what happened in qualitative study is that there's a close interaction between the knower and the known. So there's a close interaction between you as a researcher and the participant. You're going to have to sometimes meet the participant, have to build trust. And because you are meeting participant and having that interaction, you technically influence them because it maybe cause them to maybe build trust. And because they build trust, they'll be able to share the information. So the way you interact with them will affect the information that you are taking from them, right? Because if you haven't built trust, the information that they will give you will be different from a participant that you have built trust with them. So there's a close connection between you as a researcher and the participant, and also maybe the phenomenon that you are studying, right? The last one is value. This is where you think about what you bring in. Your value, your beliefs will influence the action that you take in the research, right? So it's very important when you're doing research and when you are reporting your study, you have to talk about your background and your biases and how they influenced the research process. So it's very important to talk about that. So the next one that I have to talk about, so based on these assumptions, what action do you have to take in your study? So what you have to do is that, as I said, you are going to collect multiple realities, right? You are going to collect multiple perspectives concerning the issue that you are presenting to participants. So you want participants to share or give information about an issue. You're going to get different kinds of views. So your role is to collect participant reality or experience and then capture how the context of their background influence their reality. So because you're giving different information, you have to also know more about the context, the situation that they are in. So if they tell you that they are struggling with life, right? You have to also find out why are they struggling? What is the context? What is the situation that they are in that makes them say that they are struggling with life, right? Then after collecting the data, you have to analyze the data, right? You analyze their experience and develop themes to address the research question that you have. But remember that as you are analyzing also, your background and biases and beliefs can influence the way you analyze the data, right? So you have to know yourself. This is where you have to really know yourself as a researcher. Know your background, know yourself, because your background can influence the information that you are collecting from participants, can influence how you analyze your data. So what do you have to think about when you're doing the research based on these assumptions? So first of all, you have to be aware of your values. What is your background? I'm not talking about background that are not related to the study. You don't have to bombard readers with your background that is not unrelated, that are not related to your study. Background that are related, maybe how you became interested in a topic. What is your perception about a topic? What are your biases about the issue that you are focusing on? This is the information that you have to be aware of. And also make your values known as you are reporting in chapter 3. You are talking about the research design. You have to talk about your background. You have to talk about your role in the study because you're going to influence the study. And also, you have to get to know your participants. It's very important, and build trust, because when you build trust, the information that they're going to give to you is going to be very different from when you don't build trust, so that the information will be credible. And also, you have to distinguish between your view and the view of participants. It's very important. As you collect information, sometimes, especially when you are doing observation, when you are observing as participants are doing something, there's high probability for you to interpret things that you're based on your personal biases. So you have to separate what you are observing or the information that you are receiving from what you think about the information. Your thought about the information is very, very different from the information that you are receiving or observing. So you have to make the distinction as a qualitative researcher. Pay attention to context. The context is everything when it comes to qualitative study. The context is what kind of conditions that influences their behavior. Why are they behaving this way? Why are they saying what they are saying? It's very important for you to always bring context, because without context, we cannot understand the information that you are presenting or analyzing. So I think there are questions coming in. And Kuba,
yes, so I think you actually touched on this already under making your values known, but the question is, do our backgrounds, beliefs, and biases actually appear in our dissertation, or is it just for introspection designing the research? Confused because I've been told not to refer to myself in the document.
Okay, so when you're doing a qualitative study, it makes sense. In your chapter 3, you should have a section called Researcher, Background, and Role. That is where you talk about your interest, how you became interested in the topic, what is your perception about the topic, what are your biases about the topic. It's very important, because when somebody is reading this document, your qualitative study, is when you're doing quantitative, you don't have to bring your background, because the quantitative study, you are separated from the issue that you are doing. There should not be any link between what you are doing and also there shouldn't be any influence of your actions on participants or the information that you're collecting. But the qualitative study, because you are so close to the topic and participants, you have to let people know about your background in chapter 3. So that when I'm reading your document, I know, oh, that's why you interpreted this way, because you have passed through this experience before, or because you know this information, or because you can identify yourself with participants. So your background information is so important when you're doing a qualitative study.
And there was a second question, going back to axiological factors. Is it important to consider axiological factors of participants?
Yes, yes, because the reason being that their values and beliefs informs their reality. That's why when I said that you can allow 10 participants to pass through the same situation, all the 10 participants who passed through the same situation, maybe they passed through maybe natural disaster, and maybe after 2 months, interview all of them, right? You can see that they will give different perspective about their experiences, right? So this means that you have to find out why participant A background is very different. How participant A responses to my question very different from participant B. That is why when you are presenting your findings in chapter 4, you have to give a little brief information about participants. Maybe their educational level, maybe their location, maybe their gender. All some of the basic factors or their beliefs can influence the information that you are presenting or the information that you're going to get from them. So when it comes to qualitative study, the context is everything. You have to know the context. You have to know why they are saying that information or why they're giving you that information. Because it's not about generalizing your findings. It's about understanding, getting a deep understanding of the issue that you are focusing on. Any other question? Okay, so then I can move on. Okay, so after that, then you have to think about, so based on your research question, what is the best approach that I have to use, right? So there are 3 main steps that you can follow to identify the appropriate approach, research approach for your study. So first of all, you have to assess the methodological rationale of the potential research approaches. I'm going to talk about that. The second one is engage in a process of elimination. And lastly, you have to review the characteristics of the research question. So I'm going to go through the steps so that you understand. So first of all, assessing the methodological rationale of potential research approaches. So there are 5 main qualitative research approaches. We have phenomenological approach, gradient theory approach, narrative, we have case study, we have ethnography, we have other approaches. You know, even for phenomenology, we have sub approaches that based on what you have read. But these are the main ones that, you know, I can talk about it today, So what is the methodological rationale for using phenomenological approach? So the phenomenological approach is more about capturing participant experience, right? You are examining how they make sense of the experience. They have passed through something that you want them to share, right? They have lived experience, and then you want to will them to talk about that experience that they passed through, right? So if that is your focus concerning, if you want to participant to capture if you want to capture participant experience, then phenomenology is the best approach for you. Granite theory is more about developing an explanation or developing a model or a theory to understand a phenomenon that you are focusing on, or understand a process or human behavior, right? You want to understand something. So you want to develop a theory or an explanation to understand that. If that's what you want to focus on, granite theory is the best. You don't have to develop a theory. You can develop a model or something, a proposition to that best, fit the data that you have collected, at the same time addressing or helping you to understand the phenomenon that you are focusing on. So let's move into to narration. So narrative approach is more about gathering participant stories about an issue, right? You give them the opportunity to tell you their stories, and then you gather all the story and then analyze it and retell the story in the specified pattern. So if you are interested in giving the participant the chance to tell you their stories and then presenting that information in a story form, you can think about narrative approach. Case study is more about, getting an in-depth understanding of an issue. Really understanding a case. A case is more of something that is well defined, has its own boundaries based on maybe the location of participant or based on the issue that they have passed through. So you have to first identify a case, and then you have to think about collecting multiple data for you to understand the case. So, and also think about what is the context. So the context is very important and well-defined context. So if you are doing a study and you want to really get into the root of a matter or get into the root of the phenomenon that you are focusing on, and you want to collect multiple data, then case study is the best approach. Ethnography, always think about ethnography environment, right? You are going into the natural environment of participants and trying to find out how they interact with themselves and interact with the environment, and then you're going to do maybe observation and also interact with them for you to understand an issue or phenomenon. So ethnography is all about going in there to the natural environment and describing what is going on, doing observation, collecting notes. So if that's your focus, then ethnography is the best approach. So after reviewing all the methodological rationale, finding out, okay, why do you have to use this approach, right? Then you have to think about, okay, let me look at my research question. What do I really want to find out, right? Then I think there's a question coming in.
Yes, it just got here. Tell us how to combine methodology. For example, how to use phenomenology to collect data and how to use grounding theory to analyze data in regard to stigma in Ghana.
Oh, yes. So what you have to do is, so the phenomenology will focus on capturing the experience of participants, right? So you identify a participant concerning the teens that has a mental health issues, and then you interview them and find out, okay, so what are the issues that you are focusing on? What do you think about mental health issue in Ghana? And what do you think about people perception about having mental health problem? Have you been able to assess, have you been able to seek for help? So you can capture participant experiences, right? They're going to tell you what they think about the topic that you are presented to them. And then after that, you can use granite theory to help you to understand the process, right? How the stigmatization influence their health-seeking behavior. So you can develop a theory or a model using grounded theory. You can pass through the analysis process where we call it the initial coding, actual coding, theoretical coding, and other things to analyze the data to develop a team for you to address it. So you can combine two methodologies. But I always tell students, if you are not good in combining, focus on one, right? So don't force yourself to combine methodology if you don't have much skills in doing that. I know of a student who was able to combine narrative with phenomenology, and sometimes and also narrative with grounded theory. If you want to combine, look into the existing literature and see whether somebody has used it before, and then you can learn more about how the best way of combining an approach. So, any other question? So the next step is to look at the characteristics of a research question, and then you engage in elimination process. So you look at the 5 approaches and see, okay, which one is not really consistent with the research question that I have. So based on that, you can eliminate about 3 or 4. And then the next step is to determine the kind of data that you want. So based on the research question, what kind of data do you want to collect? And then try to compare the kind of data with the methodological rationale of the approach. And then based on that, you'll be able to identify the approach that you want to use. So in order to remember, I made this one the red C. So R stands for reviewing the research question, the E stands for elimination, and D stands for determining the data that you need, and then comparison, and the C stands for comparing the data that you need and also the methodological rationale of the approach that you have chosen. So looking at this, you can engage in elimination. So based on your research question, you can know that if your research question is more of the ontological nature, then you have to think about phenomenology or ethnography or narrative. If it's epistemological in nature, think about the case study, think about ethnography, think about grounded theory or phenomenology. So these are the best ways that you can eliminate some of the approaches that don't fit your study. So back to this question. So based on this, what do you think? What is the best approach? You can type in your answer. So the question is, how does mental health stigma influence health-seeking behaviors among teens with mental health problems in a low-income neighborhood in Accra, Ghana? What do you think? What's the best approach? Oh, phenomenology. Okay. Do you want to explain why it's phenomenology? Should I give you a chance? Let me see. Oh, somebody said grounded theory. Yes, great. Okay, so phenomenology. Let's see whether phenomenology will work. Okay, so are we going to capture the experience of participants? So you are going in there, maybe you might identify teens with mental health issues and then maybe interview them and find out what do they think about maybe mental health stigma, and then also what do they think about seeking for help. I think you can use phenomenology. And also I can see a lot of grounded theory. Yes, you can do that because you want to understand the relationship or understand the process how mental health stigma influences the health-seeking behavior. Oh, someone said because it's the natural. Kuba, can you? Is there any question or a comment?
Yeah. So I believe grounded because of the natural environment.
Oh yes, yeah, natural environment, and Yeah, you use granite theory when you want to explain a phenomenon. It doesn't have to be in their natural environment, but qualitative study, you have to make sure that the things are happening in the natural environment, but you just want to, the main phenomenological, methodological rationale of using granite theory is to develop a model or an explanation of a process or a behavior. So I think all of you are right. So you can use granite theory, or you can use case study. Nobody mentioned case study. Okay, so you can use case study because if you want to find out in-depth understanding of the case, right? You want to find out, so maybe there's an existing study that has talked about, there's a relationship between mental health stigma and also health-seeking behavior. There's a relationship. You as a researcher want to find out why there's a relationship, what is really going on, how is one variable or concept influencing the other. You want to go into detail. So if you want to use granite theory, you might have to interview the participant, the team. You can interview the parents. You can interview the school teacher, or you can interview the siblings. You can interview anybody who can help you to understand the connection between mental health stigma and also the health-seeking behavior. You can also find out whether there's any kind of organization that are helping people with mental health problems. You can interview them, you can analyze documents. So you can use granite theory if you want to really get into the in-depth. You can use case study if you want to get in-depth information. But you can also use granite theory, because if you want to develop a theory to maintain the connection between the health-seeking behavior and the stigma, you can use granite theory. You can use phenomenology if you are focusing on giving participants the chance. I'm talking about the teens, the chance to tell you their experiences, right? So it can be phenomenological approach, but I think we are focusing on the best approach. So the best approach will be granite theory or case study.
And so here's a question related to this. I read that when using case study, the researcher should not have over 5 in the sample. What are your thoughts on this, and what would be good sample numbers for each of the approaches?
I'm going to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it now. I'm going to talk about it. I think sampling the number of participants, I'm going to talk about that. So there's not much time, so I'm going to be fast and talk about the sample size. Okay, so then you have to think about the data collection strategies. We have many.
Before you talk about sample size really quickly, one other question came in. Could you use grounded theory on it?
I think I lost you. Kuba, are you still there?
Could you use grounded theory on an impact study?
On an impact study, you might not be able to use grounded theory unless you are finding out how the process, how one variable or concept impacts the other concept. Then you can use grounded theory. You can develop a theory to explain the process. So besides that, I think grounded theory might not be the best unless if you say that what is the impact. It's more of, if you are even moving from qualitative to quantitative because you want a specific impact. So if you want to find out how does one variable or concept impacts the other, then I think the grounded theory, because we want to develop an explanation of a process. Okay. So let's look at any other question. Okay, so we can look at the data collection strategies. So data collection strategies, we have observation, participant observation, in-depth interview, document analysis or collection, and also focus group. So based on the approach that you choose, let's say if you want to choose ethnography, you have to do observation. You have to go and see what they are doing and observe and sometimes participate. So you can do participant observation and collect notes. You can also interview them during the time. But when it comes to phenomenology, it's more of in-depth interview. So you have to interview them and find out what their perception about issue or their experience. Case study, you can collect multiple data. So this means that you can do a document collection and analysis. You can do focus group. You can do observation. So you can collect multiple data. So this is the information that you, the strategies that you can use to collect data based on the approach that you choose. So when it comes to sampling strategy, we have a qualitative sampling strategy, and then we have also quantitative sampling strategy. Under quantitative, we have random sampling and non-random sampling. But we're going to focus, we don't have time, so we're going to focus on the qualitative part. We have 5 main types of sampling strategy that you can use. We have intensity, homogeneous sampling, we have criterion sampling, we have snowball, and also random purposive sampling. So as you can see from the screen, intensity is more of maybe you are focusing on a phenomenon and then you want to focus different aspects of the issue. You're focusing on the case, but you want to focus on different aspects. So each of the different aspects, maybe you want to focus on an aspect, each of the different aspects, based on how much time or the kind of document that you want to collect, it informs the number of participants that you need for that aspect, right? So intensity is more of, let's say you are focusing on the mental health issue or health-seeking behavior among the participants. So you want to focus on health-seeking behavior in terms of what maybe the existing organizations are helping those with mental health issues, right? If this is the component of health-seeking issues that you want to focus on. So based on that, maybe you want to look into that. So based on that, you can collect or you can sample participants that will help you to address that component. And then you can look at a different component and sample participants that will help you to address. So that's all about intensity. So you look at the different components concerning the phenomenon and then sample participants based on the component or based on the issue that you really want to look into. Homogeneous sampling is more about focusing on participants that have the same experience, right? They have the same, they have passed through the same experience or they have the same experience, and then you want to sample those participants to help you to address the research question that you have. Criterion sampling is you already have a specified criteria that you have listed that you want. So if a student, if participant qualify for that, then the person can be part of your study. So based on the qualification, the person can be part of your study. So you have a list of things that a person has to qualify to be part of your study, to be so that you can select them. So criteria sampling is sampling participant based on a specified qualification. So maybe the participant should be between 18 and 25. They should have mental health issues. They should have this, they should have that. These are the criteria that you have to follow. I think there's a question coming in.
Yes, I am using a mixed method approach, specifically sequential, explorative, phenomenological study. I'm using a self-assessment tool to determine rating of cultural competence. Then those who meet a standard would then be interviewed. This would fall under criterion sampling, right?
Yes, because based on the qualification, so this means that you are using that tool to really determine who will qualify for the next step, right? So based on, so you can look at it like a criteria sample. And the good thing about sampling strategy is all about, you can also combine sampling strategy. So you can use maybe purposive sampling with criteria sampling. So you select participants based on the purpose of the study. You then, based on the purpose of the study, then you want to maybe sample some of them for the qualitative part. So based on what maybe the score that you're going to get when you use a certain instrument, maybe they got a lower score, so you're going to focus on all of those people who got the lower score to interview and see what is going on. Then you see how you started with purposive sampling, then you are moving into criteria sampling. So, So there's a question, how many participants do you need?
And then a bit of a follow-up question about sample size.
Yes, I think people are talking about
quickly.
Yes.
So the question that came up as a result of what you're saying, I think, is how many participants do you need for a phenomenological study?
Yes, so I'm going to talk about that. So what I'm going to do is, because we don't have enough time, please feel free to leave if you want to, because we are recording it, and then you can contact me, and then I will send you the recording. So feel free to leave. Don't hesitate if you want to leave. So I'm recording it, so you're definitely going to get the rest of the information. So snowball sampling, you know, because you recruit participants, and then the participant that you recruited can also recommend people who qualify for your study. Random purposive sampling. So you start by engaging in purposive sampling. So you sample participants based on the purpose of your study, right? Based on the purpose, based on the predetermined purpose, you focus on them, sampling them. So maybe you sample about 100 who qualify for your study. Then you can randomly sample from the 100 to interview. So you see how you are combining random sampling to purposive sampling. So that's all about, if you want to get more information, I have the reference there in the last slides, or if you contact me, I can provide you that reference. Okay, so everybody is talking about the number of participants. The bad news is we don't know, right? The good news is it depends. Okay, so it's not like a quantitative study where you can do G power to find out the number of participants for your study. For correlation, you can just do the G power and find, okay, how many participants do I need for your study? For qualitative, it depends. So these are the 7 issues that you have to think about when you are talking about your participant. It depends on the approach. So let's say you are doing narrative. Maybe you can focus on one person. For the person you spend a lot of time with the person, everything that the person is doing, and then you describe what is going on. You give the participant a time to tell you their story, and based on that, you can use it to address your research question that you have. If you are using case study, maybe you can focus on one case, one person, or you can focus on a group of people as a case, right? You can focus on a group of 20 as a case. You can focus on one person. So it all depends, right? It also depends on the recommendation made by qualitative researchers. As you read the qualitative information from qualitative, they can recommend the number of participants for the approach. You can look into that and see. It's also based on the homogeneity of participants, their background, right? So if their background are similar, you don't need a lot of participants because there's high probability for them to tell you the same story. So if they have diverse background, you need a lot of participants to come into conclusion or develop themes. It depends on accessibility, because maybe the issue that you are focusing on is so complex and sensitive, you might not get a lot of participants for your study. You might get about 10, you might get about 2, you might get about 1 person, because the issue that you are focusing on is so unique. So it depends on the accessibility. It depends on also the attainability of saturation. Saturation is all about reaching a stage where no new information is being collected. As you collect data, as you interview them, you reach a stage where, no, the participants are saying the same thing. You don't have to continue because they are saying the same thing. You stop the interview based on, and also it's also based on availability of time and resources. Do you have the time for you to spend about 2 years collecting your data? Do you have time to spend about 10 months? Do you have time to spend about 10 years? Or do you have time to spend about 2 weeks to collect your data? So it depends on the time and the resources that you have. It can inform the number of participants for your study. Lastly, the adequacy of the potential data to address your research question. Remember that your research question is driving an approach. So depending on the adequacy, depending on asking yourself, so focusing on only 2 participants, will I be able to get rich information to address my research question that I have? Focusing on 10 participants, can I reach the situation where I can address the research question that I have? So these are the questions that you have to ask yourself to to come into consideration. Because when you are defending your dissertation or when you are presenting your findings, people are going to ask you, how many participants did you focus on? And you say, okay, I focus on 2. Why 2? Why not 1 person? Why not 10 participants? Why not 20? You have to have a very good justification why you think that 10 participants are adequate for you to collect rich information. So I recommend that you read an article that was developed by qualitative researchers. They were qualitative experts, and they were asked the same question. How many participants do I need for a qualitative study? Some of the researchers said 2, some of them said 20, some of them said 10, some of them said 50. But they gave a good reason why you should focus on 10. They gave a good reason why you should focus on 2. They gave a good reason why you should focus on 50. So you can email me and I can send you the link. I think, and Dr. Glazik, you might have the link, the reference to this article. You can send it to.
Sure, I'll put it on the in the chat box.
Great. So the bad news is that I don't know the number. But the good news is that there are a lot of reasons. You just have to decide concerning the number of participants based on these criteria so that you'll be able to justify why you're focusing the number that you're focusing on. So the next one is the data analysis. I don't want to spend time on this because I have a presentation that I've put in SlideShare that, I did a data analysis. So I just want to give you brief information. Data analysis is all about reducing data. It's all about reducing the data, but you don't lose the meaning of the data. You are reducing the data because you are assigning words, phrase, sentence to represent the information, significant information that you are collected from participants so that you help you to address your research question, right? You are assigning something. So at the end of the day, you develop themes, and then the themes has 2 roles, or the team have 2 important roles. The team should represent the data that you analyze, and the team should address the research question that you have. If your team is not doing these 2 things, then there's a problem, right? So, so the coding process is you start by coding the information that you have collected from participants. You move after coding, you sort them. Sorting is more about categorizing, grouping them, and then based on the grouping, then you develop themes. And then if you are doing grounded theory, you can go further and then develop theory. As I said, we don't have time for me to go through all these things because I have a presentation on that. And then let's talk about quality assurance, because that's very important. When it comes to qualitative study, there's a lot of work for you to do, for you to make sure that you have convinced your audience that the themes that you came up with, the findings that you came up with, you didn't make it up. Because when you talk about qualitative study, it's all about subjectivity, right? You went there, you went to participants, collected the data from them, and you analyzed it. And then you are presenting the findings to me. You said that you developed themes. These are the things that you've developed. How am I going to be sure that the theme that you developed came from participants? How am I going to be sure that the information is credible? So these are the things that you have to think about. First of all, you think about the credibility of your information. Do the data and the findings truly reflect participant experience? How are you going to do that? How are you going to make sure that the data reflect participant experience? What are you going to do? You have to make sure that participants are giving you information that is true and credible. How are you going to do that? You have to build trust. You build trust with them so that they can give you accurate information, right? You have to make sure that you collect information, rich context. You have to collect the in-depth, rich context of the information that you're collecting from them. you have to think about collecting more than one source of data. So maybe you can do interviews and maybe do document collection and analysis, and based on that you'll be able to address the research question that you have and also improve the credibility of the information. You sometimes collect the data and then go back to the participant. This is what I collected from you. Does it reflect the information that you gave me? So that you are verifying the information from participants. That's another way of increasing the credibility of the information. Another way of increasing credibility is when you are reporting that information, when you are writing your chapter 4, when you are doing your data reporting or finance reporting. When you talk about themes, sometimes you have to connect the theme to some of the information that you collected from participants. So you describe the themes and then you give an example from the data to say that, okay, I did not make the themes up. These are the themes that directly represent the information I've collected from them. This example of what participants said, that reflects the themes that I came up with. So this is a way of building credibility, because if you don't build credibility, people are going to question your findings. And another way of building credibility is also being able to describe step by step how you collected your data, how you analyze your data. It's very important for you. The next one is transferability. Can you transfer the findings to similar contexts? The only way you can do that is to describe the context, right? So qualitative study, the context is everything. The situation that informs the or that influence participants' information. So that to describe what they are experiencing, then you have to ask them more information about what are the things that influence, or what are the things that will help you to understand the information that they are presented to you. So always have to describe the context, right? The context can be described by giving participant information, giving us information about participant background, giving us information about their environment, the situation they find themselves in. So if you tell me the situation and the background of participants, and then you tell me that this is the information they gave you, then I will understand, oh, that's the reason why they gave you this information, because this is the background information, this is the context. Oh, and now I understand. Then I can transfer these findings to the similar context. So if I see that I meet another participant with the same context who passed through the same situation, I can say that, oh, I think these findings can be applied to this. You are not seeking for generalization. You are seeking for transferability of the finding to a similar situation. The next one, dependability. Can we arrive at the same result if we pass through the same process? If I follow the procedure that you described in chapter 3, step-by-step procedure, can I arrive at similar results? Right? So how will you make sure that your information is dependable? By giving a clear presentation of how you collected your data, how you analyze your data, so that people will be able to understand and can follow the same step and get similar results. So I'm saying similar results because we might not get the same results. Why? Because if I'm doing the same research that you are doing, my background can influence the information that you are giving. So influence information that I'm collecting. So that I can give, because of my background, we might not arrive at the same information, but we can arrive at similar information. So you also have to describe your role and biases. So these are the three main things to look at when you want to make sure that your study is quality. Okay, so this is just a recap. So I told you in the beginning that always think about the big picture, the problem statement, the purpose, the research question, the research design, your background, the philosophical assumptions, the quality assurance, and the data collection and analysis and presentation of findings. So these are the big picture. So the question is, what is your research plan? What is the big picture of your research? And I also want to go to and talk about this one. We talk about research design. The research design is a logical description of what you're going to collect and analyze. And then the question to you is, what is your qualitative research plan. So I hope you enjoy this presentation, and if you have any information, you can contact us at NCAID, and this is our email address, and we'll be able to have a discussion with you and help you to accomplish your goal. I hope you learn a lot from this. I'll give you the chance to ask questions if you have, and then I'll be able to address them. So, or I can unmute everyone.
Oh my God, get all the way to Western is fabulous. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, any question for me? Okay. So, if there's no question, then we can call it a day. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope you learn a lot from this. And as I said, you can contact us and we'll be happy to help you. And also thank you, Dr. Glazik, for helping me with the questions. I really appreciate it. So thank you.
No problem. Great questions, everyone. We'll talk.
Okay. Thank you. And bye, everyone.